President Donald Trump announcing that the second missing American crew member whose fighter jet was shot down over Iran has been successfully rescued by U.S. forces. President Trump posting on his Truth Social account not long ago here, writing in part, "We got him. My fellow Americans, over the past several hours, the United States military pulled off one of the most daring search and rescue operations in U.S. history for one of our incredible crew member officers, who also happened to be a highly respected colonel, and who I am thrilled to let you know is now safe and sound." President Trump went on to write that this service member sustained injuries, but will be just fine. This high-stakes search, it started this week after an F-15 Strike Eagle fighter it was actually shot down in the region. Another crew member was rescued alive shortly after the crash and is now receiving medical attention. For the latest now, let's head over to CNN's Jim Sciutto joining me live from Tel Aviv. Jim, is there any indication that this operation was clearly in the works since this incident, since the crash?
It was absolutely. The search and rescue efforts underway since the moment this F-15 went down with its two-person crew. As you know, they rescued the first pilot early on, but I was told on Friday that they had received a communication from the second pilot Friday evening and had spent a good, more than 24 hours attempting to locate him and then get him out of the country safely, and that's what the president has just announced. We were also told that he had been injured, and that of course added to the concern, the urgency to get him out of the country safely. In addition to that, we know that there was a race in effect underway between U.S. search and rescue teams and Iranian authorities, the military, who were attempting to get to him first. And you even heard Iranian state TV encouraging residents in the area to locate him, offering rewards to locate him, and report that location to the authorities. So this is a race in effect that U.S. search and rescue teams won, and a difficult one, because these search and rescue operations, although the teams are highly trained for this, they're dangerous because you're putting a lot of aircraft over hostile territory, and many of those aircraft, the helicopters involved in the extraction, the fixed-wing aircraft involved in locating the pilot, they fly low and they fly relatively slow compared to the jet, for instance, the F-15, which was shot down. And Iran, of course, demonstrated its ability to threaten aircraft, taking down that F-15 and also taking down an A-10 Warthog, as it's known, in that same 24-hour period. So this is an enormous relief, certainly for the pilot's family, for the military. I am certain for the other member of that F-15 crew, who I'm sure spent the hours leading up to this rescue wondering if his co-pilot or really weapons officer would come out alive. And we now have that good news.
Yeah, it's a wonderful outcome, especially for the family of the service member, without a doubt. The president writing that all Americans, regardless of their party, should be proud of this moment. So there is that. However, the war rages on, Jim. So based on what you're hearing there in the region, what happens next, especially as we continue to look at this current deadline that President Trump set for Monday for the Strait of Hormuz to reopen?
Yeah. Well, the president has said that this operation will not affect U.S. war planning, and as he said in his address to the nation 2-3 days ago, that he said there were 2 to 3 more weeks in the war. Now, we should take both that timeline and his latest threat to Iran with something of a grain of salt, because he has put out a number of deadlines, red lines, etc., that he hasn't met on those timelines, right? So that timeline could slide. But at a minimum, the president is saying that he's trying to apply more pressure on Iran to open the strait, which of course is affecting international oil markets. And it's somewhat contradictory again to his speech to the nation, because you'll remember in his address he said that the U.S. doesn't care about opening the strait because it has enough of its own oil, and he intended to leave that to other nations. But here he seems to be putting himself back in the game, as it were, to try to pressure Iran to open the strait to allow shipping. But I will say this, that we know from both its continued ability to target countries such as Israel, as we see air raid warnings here quite frequently, as do Iran's Gulf allies. You know from Iran having been able to shoot down these two jets, but also our own reporting that U.S. intelligence assessments show that Iran continues to have missile capabilities, that it still has an ability to fight back, right? So any sense that this war might be over soon and decisively, there's really not a lot of evidence of that right now.
I want to head over now to retired U.S. Army Major General Mark McCarley. He's a founder of the legal firm McCarley and Rosen. Thank you so much for joining us, General. I'm wondering if I could just get off the top your reaction to this news from President Trump that the service member has been rescued.
As a service member and a U.S. citizen, I am totally elated. This is a wonderful outcome in what could have been disastrous for the U.S. in terms of the global perspective of this conflict with Iran.
I'm curious if you just really punctuate that last point, General, just how high the stakes were, not only obviously with the life of the service member hanging in the balance, but also what this could have potentially meant diplomatically and militarily for this conflict that rages on.
If that crew member of that F-15 Strike Eagle had in fact been captured by the Iranians, there is no doubt in my mind that the Iranians would exploit that capture. That service member would see himself paraded in front of social media outlets in Iran, television, and the caption on that is, "America is weak. Its claim of indefensibility has now been stricken, and we Iranians will prevail in this conflict." And then, of course, what was discussed by several of your other commentators is the exploitation of that service member in custody, the efforts, and I would certainly assert very violent efforts to extract valuable information from that very proud and heroic member of our Air Force.
Yeah, thankfully, that was not the case. When you just in reading over this post from the president, General, it really does paint a harrowing picture of what the last day and a half had been like for the service member. As the president writes that he was behind enemy lines in treacherous mountains of Iran, being hunted down by our enemies, wrote the president. But also that the president suggesting here that the military was essentially monitoring him 24 hours a day and planning this rescue. So based on this post from the president, it seems that it's likely that the Pentagon knew exactly where he was, perhaps just waiting for that most ideal moment to mitigate risks, given the small arms fire that they experienced recently, to be able to extract him.
Yeah, I appreciate that, your explanation of the dynamics of a search and rescue recovery mission. To get down to the basics, at the moment that crew member ejected from the F-15, an emergency beacon is activated, and that communicates with a satellite system. The signal is sent to command headquarters, and that initiates the search and rescue operation. The question I had personally, especially since almost 48 hours had transpired since the ejection, is whether or not that system was either degraded or somehow the signal was lost. But based upon what we see now, the signal must have continuously was continuously emitting information about the location of this crew member, all of this encrypted under some very, very dangerous and difficult circumstances. And you even addressed, and it came up a couple of times, about the geography of this particular location. On that west side of Iran, it is mountainous, certainly not near any urban center at all. For anyone that is in a situation such as this crew member, he's ejected, he's injured, he has very light kit, meaning he has some very few rations, a little bit of water. And here he is in the midst of nowhere trying to evade a multiplicity of Iranians who have been motivated by this offer, both an inspirational offer from the Islamic Republic leadership, whomever that is at this particular point in time, plus the alleged incentive of $60,000. So putting all this together, it was extremely dangerous. And once again, we salute the members of our armed services who conducted this rescue mission and were able to extract this service member. The situation otherwise would make tomorrow a very, very difficult day, not only for that crew member if he were apprehended, but more importantly for the whole effort that has been expended thus far in this conflict.